Hello, everyone. I seem to have finally gotten all of this set up so that I can record my screen and myself at the same time. And it has been like a day and a half of trying to figure this out, but it looks like it is all working. So let us dive in here. We're going to go over the transits that are occurring during July 2024 today. We'll bring this through day by day on the screen here, and I'll show the different aspects to you and everything like that. Keep in mind, this is my first monthly transit video, so, try and be a little bit forgiving and nice, but let's see. We will get through this together, and then we will learn from whatever mistakes I make during this. So let us dive in. Down here, down below here, whatever that's going to look like after I post edit, I'm going to have like some notes and stuff about different days and things like that. I did want to do a bit of an overview for the month. Just up front, we have some planets changing signs, of course, the standard three being Sun, Mercury, and Venus are all going to be moving into Leo because it's going to become Leo season this month. And then we also have Mars entering Gemini, and that's going to happen on the 20th. That should be pretty interesting. It's going to be just after one of our biggest aspects for this month, but we'll get into that in a second. We also have our two lunations this month, the new moon in Cancer on the 5th of July, and then we have a blue full moon in Capricorn. Blue moon meaning in astrology that it's the second full moon in a sign rather than necessarily in a month. But yeah, so that's going to be a blue full moon in Capricorn. We just had one somewhere around the 21st of June as well. That was also in Capricorn, so that's significant and interesting. But that, of course, was all the way on the other side of Capricorn. That was early degrees Capricorn, and then we're going to get one that's going to be right at the end of Capricorn there. We also have some pretty impactful hard aspects this month. We're going to have on the 2nd of July, we'll have the Sun square the nodes. On the 3rd of July, Mercury opposite Pluto. One theme that you're definitely going to be seeing throughout this entire month is continuing on the past few months. Every time that a planet moves into a new sign, it tends to be getting into an interaction with Pluto, which is in the first degree currently of Aquarius. So what's extra interesting this month is that all of this stuff that's moving into Leo is, once it pops into Leo, immediately in opposition to Pluto. So we were dealing with some Taurus ingresses and then Jupiter or Gemini ingresses, and that would have been square and then trine. But this one's going to be straight up opposition to all of the planets right when they move into that sign. So it'll be pretty interesting. When Mars moves into Gemini, that's going to be trine Pluto. That's still in my calculations a quote interesting aspect, and let's put it that way, as Mars trine Pluto. It's not necessarily super pleasant, but we'll see. So yes, we have on the 3rd of July, Mercury opposite Pluto. On the 12th of July, we have Venus opposite Pluto. On the 15th of July, we have Mars conjunct Uranus. That, in my opinion, is the big aspect this month. On the 21st of July, we have Mercury square Uranus, which is also going to be Uranus at this time will be conjunct Mars. We'll go into that more when we get to that aspect. That could be potentially quite argumentative, though. And then we have on the 23rd of July, Sun opposite Pluto. And that's going to be triggered by the moon on the 27th of July. I hope I made a note in my fuller explanation about that. But just keep in mind that Sun opposite Pluto is going to have the moon on July 27th. I believe it's going to form a T-square with it, so it's going to kind of heighten that up a bit. So that aspect will last for a few days for sure. And let's go into some of the more pleasant things. Our most pleasant day is, I kind of hate to say it, right here. It's pretty much going to be the 1st of July is going to be probably the least complicated, let me put it that way, day. There's going to be some cool aspects coming up that are going to be pleasant, but like I said, we have Pluto here that's going to be causing all sorts of just kind of weird background noise that we're constantly going to be dealing with this month as everything starts to move into Leo here in opposition to Pluto. So this is really going to kind of be throwing a bit of a wrench in the gears throughout the entire month. The 1st isn't so bad. All we have really that's any sort of challenge is that we have Mercury, which is starting to apply to an opposition to Pluto, but the oppositions are going to become more, quite a bit. As for everything else, we also have on this day, if you notice, Neptune is stationed. So it's not quite retrograde yet. That'll be tomorrow, but it is not moving. Effectively, it's not moving. So it should be a pleasant day. There should be a decent amount of potential, but hopefully it doesn't result in being too comfortable to really motivate yourself to do much. We do have the moon exactly conjunct Mars, but again, it's in Taurus. And what I'm noticing about this day, the reason why I'm like, I hope that it's not hard to get motivated, is we're pretty much stuck in like Taurus Cancer land here. Right now, we have Jupiter and Gemini, but it looks to me like a very comfortable day. You can definitely get stuff done if you really need to, but I'm not sure that the motivation is going to be there to necessarily start something new or really like push yourself to be super productive. I don't think that that's going to be the motive here. So let's go forward to the 2nd of July here. Today we have kind of the energy of the previous day. It's developing a bit into some perfected aspects. So these aspects are all kind of getting a little bit closer. We have today Mercury exactly trine Neptune. So we have Mercury here has just at noon. I think I'm going to try and keep this at noon every day. Also, I should say I have it set to Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where I am. Ignore the ascendant and the midheaven and the houses. This really doesn't matter. That's why I've taken the ascendant and the midheaven out of there. That changes with your location, so, and the time of day. So I'm trying to keep it at 0 Aries. I'm hoping that will stay, that this is going to hold, because it wasn't initially, and it was driving me a little crazy. But yeah, so getting back to this day. So yeah, we have Mercury has just perfected a trine with Neptune in the last degree of Pisces and Cancer. So that's quite pleasant. I think it'll be kind of even more interesting as it does in these like just post-noon Central Daylight Time hours, kind of start moving into Leo. I'm full disclosure, I have a lot of Pisces and Gemini, and I really love Leo energy for some reason. Don't ask. I don't really know why. I've never understood. But it should get a little bit more dynamic. It should get a little bit more like really fully creative there. If you have any sort of creative projects that you're working on, there really shouldn't be in this day any trouble motivating, because that Mercury Neptune trine, especially as Mercury moves into that fire sign, is going to start to really provide kind of an impetus, a creative urge, I think, like a muse type energy to work on something, to kind of create something out of what you're feeling and what you're imagining in particular. So yeah, we're going to have, we do have the moon moving into Gemini today as well. And that will also kind of detach us a bit from just the kind of emotions and the senses and the kind of direct pleasures that we're experiencing day to day, like we were focused on a little bit more yesterday. This is, of course, creating an exact sextile, but the moon moves rapidly so that it won't last long. But this is a really nice energy here to have. We have basically Mercury is also starting to apply a sextile to Jupiter here, and Mercury is ruling Jupiter because Jupiter is in Gemini, which is Mercury's sign. So we're kind of a little bit more detached from, again, that kind of mundane, sensual, how am I feeling in this moment kind of energy. And we're taking a little bit more of a broad view. We're kind of getting a little bit more playful, I think, in the energy here. We're going to see with Mercury moving into Leo, communication should be increasing in terms of actual interaction with other people, but it may be a little bit more kind of, I don't want to say self-absorbed, but that it only for the sake of tact, that is actually what I feel. It'll be a little bit more self-serving. So it'll be not necessarily, hey, how are you doing? Because I'm really curious about how you're doing. In that kind of scenario, the closest that it would probably reach would be like, hey, how are you doing? Because I kind of want to feel a certain way about myself with relation to how I feel about you, you know. It does become kind of somewhat more self-serving than it was in Cancer. This is, again, a comparison between Cancer and Leo, where Cancer is really concerned with those interpersonal relationships, whereas Leo is going to be more concerned with, one, having fun. What is, some people would probably say that it's like a superficial communication style, but it's just more interested in the lighthearted and the fun and what's dynamic and engaging, rather than just communication for the sake of relationship building. Let me put it that way. So people could be a little bit more dramatic in their communication style during this time. And you will definitely want to watch out for any sort of gossip during this time, especially with that Mercury just having moved into Leo, but also exactly opposite to Pluto in Aquarius here. So Mercury to Pluto. And then we also have this moving through Neptune here. And we do, of course, have this also moving through that early energy at, pointing to my screen as though you can see it. I'm still going to get used to this whole like style of reading for people. But basically, Mercury will also be communicating with Pluto, not only directly, but through Neptune and through the moon in this day. And so a little bit of Jupiter too, but that's a bit wide. So there's strong potential for misunderstandings, for deception, for intentional deception, or just miscommunication. There could be someone who simply interprets something wrong and then tells someone else, and it just, that gets weird, because then it's like, okay, were you trying to mislead me, or did you just genuinely misunderstand a situation? The energy gets all tied up and bound up, and that's kind of what I see Pluto potentially doing here, especially through these vectors, these kind of softer, more receptive vectors of confusion, and then how people are feeling in the moment with the moon there too. Mercury's not in the clearest mind state, let me put it that way, here, but it could have fun. So just watch out for gossip, essentially. And also with that moon trine to Neptune again, we do again have those kind of themes of watch out for deception, for confusion. With this particular dynamic, I did kind of get a feeling of there's a potential for kind of delusions, not only in and of themselves, but delusions of grandeur So if you know anyone who tends to fall into that, you may see that hype up quite a bit. Always best, I think, in those situations to just kind of not try to address it. We could again have this kind of manipulative communication with the interaction between these three planets. And let's see, what else do I have? Yeah, just reiterating, like, there is a positive aspect to this, which is imagination, especially creative. You can certainly, Pluto isn't just bad, of course. Pluto is one's own power, and you don't have to abuse it. It's just that it allows for itself to be used in that way sometimes. But if there's anything that you've been wanting to kind of pull up, it can kind of archetypally also represent the shadow. So if there's any sort of deep creative work that you want to do, or if there's any sort of deep meditation, if you're working with chakras, this would be probably your base chakra, kind of work that you might want to be doing to try and bring that energy into the consciousness. So bringing the shadow as much as it could be. I'm sure there's some theoretical debates about whether this is even possible. But if you can bring some of that kind of shadow energy up into the consciousness and then express it outward, that's a really good therapeutic way to use these different aspects that are occurring during this day. We do, again, now notice that the S here is red. That means stationary retrograde, not stationary direct. So Neptune's going to be retrograde until the 8th of December. It will have only moved backward about 2 degrees. So it'll be at about 27 degrees by the time it goes forward again. And that'll be the 8th of December. It will station direct again. We also do have during this day something I want to point out. Notice that the sun here, I don't have aspect lines, if you'll notice, to the nodes or to Chiron. That's just personal preference. I don't keep those on. I just look at the numbers and try and pay attention to that. But we have the sun is at the midpoint of the nodes, essentially. So it's square both of the nodes. The nodal axis is the eclipse point of the moon. And so we might see some of the things that popped up during the last eclipses come to a bit of a head here. Some of the things that I remember were going on. This would have been early April, most strongly, a bit of late March. So late March, we had the barge issue, I believe. That was when there was that barge that hit the bridge in Maryland, and then for some reason, several barges wound up much less destructively hitting several more bridges throughout, like, at least the U.S. Very bizarre situation there. I think that Mars and Saturn and Neptune were pretty close in Pisces when all that was going on. So it wasn't completely out of out of left field, but and was definitely predicted by some people. But that, and then in early April, there were some issues around Palestine-Israel situation that really kind of came to a head. That was when the student protests started picking up quite a bit, and there started to become a lot more pressure from some countries, especially within the EU. I think Ireland, I thought that they had already recognized Palestine as a state, but they and several other European countries officially within the UN recognized Palestine as a state. There was also the attack on the Iranian military personnel that were in Syria by Israel, and then the retaliation by Iran against Israel during that. And then coming off of all of that was a bit later, the Iranian president wound up dying in a helicopter crash. And I did notice that when that happened, I looked up that chart, and there was a lot of strong action going on the North Node. I believe it was the North Node during that. But that was a strong, like, what I could see in the chart of that the death of the Iranian president it seemed to be triggered by the nodes. So I would expect some weird kind of geopolitical, probably action going on around this time. So what else do we have here? There could also, with the sun to the nodes here, there could be some resistance. I did make some personal notes, like some resistance between what you want to do and your outer conditional requirements. So even if this is just, I feel like, most days a lot of people are like, no, I don't want to go to work. Obviously, I would rather do anything else, but it may come up where you feel a kind of resistance that you don't usually consciously, with certain aspects of your life that just aren't looking the way that you're hoping that they would, so that may come to the fore quite a bit. You could potentially work at cross purposes with yourself. So again, like I said, with this gossip and stuff like this, especially if this is workplace or any interpersonal relationships, just watch out for your language, watch your words definitely during this time, because you could be working at cross purposes with yourself by doing anything like that. This is a good time to start to consider what you're wanting to do, but I would not necessarily put it into action yet. And we'll kind of see why shortly. There's going to be a better time to start putting things into action. It's also a good time to consider, this is kind of along the same lines of what we've been discussing, how you can create the conditions necessary to have a life more in line with what you're really wanting. And we'll kind of get more into that with some additional transits that are coming up. So with that, let's move to, let me look at my time real quick. Ooh, 22 minutes. Okay. And let me go back to this. Okay. So we have now the 3rd of July. Let me scooch you forward. Okay. So today, it looks like there's some sense of being restrained from the kind of lighthearted mood that's desired. There's some responsibilities that are overshadowing this, but you might be able to bring some of that kind of desired lighthearted energy into productive work. So we'll see that more in a second here. So today, again, we have this aspect has perfected between Mercury and Pluto on this day. So the energy here with Mercury has moved kind of beyond this trine with Neptune. It's still present, but what Mercury is feeling much more currently now is Pluto, not so much Neptune. So there might be a shift from a kind of optimistic way of looking at things like you were yesterday. Today might be slightly more pessimistic. Hopefully not, but I could definitely see that being the case, where you know how you're kind of shifting through ideas and thoughts and you get really excited about something and then you have a sleep on it, and by the morning you're kind of feeling like, but what if that's just a pipe dream or something like that? That's kind of the energy that I'm feeling off of this. So there is still, again, like I was saying with the shadow and bringing that into the consciousness, that energy, that possibility, that potential is still very much here. And there's still like potency for insight or breakthrough in ideas, but the thoughts are going to be less fanciful and less, I guess fanciful is a good word for that, less whimsical, less just kind of assuming that, oh, the world will carry me through, it gets a lot more practical during this day. We also have, let's see here, Venus is trine Saturn. So we have Venus here in Cancer is trine Saturn, which is in Pisces. And I find this really fascinating because, Venus and Saturn are both pretty earthy planets, but they're here in water signs. They're in water signs that they certainly don't mind being in. I think Venus has some terms or bounds here, but I actually, for some reason, I'm kind of blanking on that. But they're at worst here peregrine, so they're fine. It's just that this energy isn't going to play out the way that a Venus trine Saturn necessarily typically would. And we'll see that also further into the month when we get Sun trine Saturn. It's not quite playing out in the standard way. This is much more driven by feelings. The underlying motivation is going to be feelings here. It's going to be kind of less tangible and more about how you feel about something, even if it's a tangible thing like, a job or a purchase or something like this. It's going to be driven somewhat more by sentiment during this time. This is a good time to follow up on those considerations that we were taking of kind of how to create the conditions necessary to get what you're wanting. And this is a good time to develop those ideas further. Keep thinking about this, keep pondering on this during this day, because this is giving you an additional kind of practical insight about the kind of physical nature of this. So maybe the financial aspects or the living situation aspects. This is where you can kind of really get some strong insights, not out of the blue, but just by putting your mind on it, putting your energy on it, and kind of giving it a think about how to get those things kind of sorted out in a way that's going to give you more freedom to kind of pursue things that you're wanting to, rather than feeling like you're necessarily beholden and therefore unable to pursue things the way that you're wanting to. And again, this is building on the square between the sun and the nodes here, this T-square. We also have, because of the kind of, pardon, I should have grabbed water. See, I have no idea what I'm doing with these recordings yet. If you do have any pent-up energy during this time, it definitely wouldn't hurt to, if you want to do some relaxing today, nostalgic media, I don't know, Disney movies or like whatever you watched as a kid, sensual activities like gardening or swimming, even, to some extent, sports might be fun here. Time spent with people that you're close to and that you trust, that kind of feel like family. Would be a really good way to, if there's anything that's frustrating you, like say if people are being kind of manipulated within the workplace or whatever, if you are able to have some time just to hang out, have some like good summer fun or whatever with some friends after work or whatnot, that should help you to kind of assimilate and then kind of release any of those frustrations or pent-up energies. So next we are moving into the 4th of July. This is, of course, the holiday in the US. This is also, if you use any of a number of US charts, this including the Sibley chart, which is, I think, the most common. It's the one I use. This is also the solar return, probably, of the US chart. I actually haven't looked at the solar return this year. So we have kind of one thing again that I'm noticing here is the way that this is all playing out, and considering the fact that we are in an election year and that there's just so much holier than thou energy on all sides about who loves America more and who's trying to destroy democracy or whatever. Which, in my opinion, it's everyone, So, with all of that, there's probably going to be a lot of really strong propaganda playing up during this time. I mean, it's really, really visible on the chart to me. I'm kind of, when I'm talking about gossip and things like that, that's kind of a workplace um, way of playing out the energies that I'm seeing, which geopolitically and politically, even domestically, would play out as kind of manipulative communications. Again, of course, this is the solar return also of the US. So it's, we like to play up, the US obviously during this holiday. And I just see it being played up a lot more than even usual. If you were alive during 2002, 2003, 2004, I would say that these 4th of July activities are probably going to feel a lot more like that, where there's a point that's trying to be made, and it's all stuff that at that point in my life I would have like cringed at, but at this point in my life, I think I'm just gonna laugh. But yeah, so we do have we have the moon moving into Cancer today. So again, homeland, that kind of patriotism is really going to be amped up during this time. We have now Mercury and Venus kind of getting with the opposition of Pluto here. So Venus is also kind of getting under the influence of Pluto here. It's still 10 degrees off, but it's a strong aspect. We do have a bit when that moon is finally about to move into Cancer. We have a square here between that and Neptune. I mean, these are just perfect conditions for like really playing stuff up, things being really overblown, and a lot of power plays, all within so much of it. I would expect there to be some really like pandering, kind of gross, even to the people who support them, kind of statements put out by the candidates, about how much they love America and how much their opponent, hates America or hates democracy or whatever. I would expect a lot of that kind of nonsense to really play out on a level that it hasn't in quite a while during this day. So going to the 5th of July, we're going to have the new moon during this day in Cancer. I will scoot this forward for the sake of that. Again, keep in mind that this is my time. It's not the time of the new moon. We'll keep it here. It's close enough. So it's like 5:54 and change p.m. Central Daylight Time, and it looks to me like we are +5 from UTC, so right around noon Universal Time. So this one's pretty interesting. It's nice that it's conjunct to Venus also in Cancer. I mean, this is really a beautiful combination of energies here. We also do have this taking place on the star of Sirius, which does bring me to a major warning about this new moon. Sirius can indicate physical injury, but other than that, it's pretty much a completely benefic, exalting kind of energy to Sirius. So it should make things more pleasant, but I would caution, just be careful with your limbs and your physical body, basically. It has this applying conjunction to Venus. This is still kind of square the nodes a little bit. So this is our midpoint between the eclipses. So eclipses in March, April happened here and here, technically, but the sun was here during those. The sun will be over here during the eclipses in October. And we're at the midpoint of that. So this could, again, like I said, pretty much the same message as when the sun was at those points. It could trigger off some of those same issues. There could be these things coming around again, basically. And so similar issues, developments with regard to the same issues that arose during late March, early April this year. So we do also have this applying trine to Saturn, which is quite nice. That makes this energy a lot more accessible in terms of being really productive during this time, potentially. Again, not necessarily just for the sake of productivity. I would expect for this to be really focused on, I want X, Y, and Z for me and mine, and therefore I'm willing to put in pretty much as much effort as it takes with this kind of energy here. And also being willing to compromise, I think, with Venus in the mix here. You're also willing to compromise to keep the peace, I think, with this whole situation, which is really good because of the fact that we still have this kind of just weird energy there. I don't hate Pluto. I think Pluto is kind of cool. I am very much into like Jungian shadow work and so forth. And I'm excited about Pluto moving into Aquarius and everything. But so my 8th house is Capricorn, and I was born during 89, where I have Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all in Capricorn. And so when Pluto, for the past 15, 20 years, since 2008, was going through Capricorn, that was really intense. And then my Saturn return also happened in that time. So I don't play with Pluto. I love Pluto, it teaches you the greatest of lessons, but it's not to be trifled with, let me put it that way. So we do have also this applying sextile to Mars. So that's really just reinforcing anything that can help you and yours, and which is going to keep the peace and is going to create the conditions, again, to get what it is that you're kind of after, for your own sake, for the sake of your family. You're going to be willing to go to whatever extent to get that. So even if someone's pushing your buttons here, I'm hoping that especially me pointing this out will help. There's a lot of energy here to just let it, water off a duck's back, just let it wash over you and just leave, because it really, if people are being weird during this time because of this aspect, you don't have to take that energy of theirs on. That's their own thing. That's their own shadow, basically. So this is really helpful to kind of compartmentalizing other people's shadows and the way that they may act from yourself, or anything to do with you. It really doesn't have anything to do with you. So yeah, I mean, other than that, again, new moon here, all the new moon stuff. If there's anything that you're wanting to start, especially, this would be really good. Conjunct Venus in Cancer, all of this being ruled by the moon. Anything beauty related that you're thinking of changing up. I've actually been thinking about dyeing my hair again because it's been way too long. This would be really the perfect time to do that. This is really, really favorable for that. Really favorable for it. Pluto's not really going to screw with that too much. And then you've got all of these trines plus all of this energy together, all ruled by the moon. That's really good. So anything like that, any sort of creative work that you want to kind of get started on, kind of feel it out, see, how it feels, especially to see how anything feels, to dip your toe in the water with regard to anything like that. That's really favored by this during that time. So let's see. We also have Mars. So like I said, these guys are trying to Saturn, and they are sextile to Mars. Mars is also sextile to Saturn. So this is actually a really interesting aspect pattern that is forming here. And it's extraordinarily productive, especially once the sun kind of moves along a bit. Mars is moving at a weirdly rapid pace. We'll see that later in the month too. because basically what we're going to see is that when Mercury goes up here and starts to apply a square to Uranus, Mercury actually isn't going to perfect its square to Mars until way down the line because Mars is moving really fast. But basically, this should be playing out as an energy that's really extraordinarily productive. You should be able to pull energy at any point that you really need it. You should be able to really draw that up and put that to good use here. It is it's softening the edges of Pluto here, but I also, when I see aspect patterns like these, this does soften, yeah, but it also is another basically route of entry, is kind of how I see these aspect patterns as well. It's like, okay, well, if Pluto can't access Mercury directly, if someone is very aware of the direct shadow, then maybe it will, work its way through with, say, going to a show, and then, it triggers something or whatnot, So yeah, sorry, not to get off on a tangent, but yeah, no, like low key, this is extraordinary energy. In terms of like a surge of energy, that I don't really strongly see here, because again, we're dealing with Cancer, Pisces, Taurus, These aren't the most like, get out and get stuff done and, like surge of energy type of signs. But as Mars moves closer to Uranus, we may even see some of that coming out of Taurus here. So that should be interesting. You might actually feel, I did make a note of this, you might actually feel a little bit more like relaxing than anything. If you do choose to do that, it should be really pleasant. So let's move to the 6th here. We have, during this day, not a whole lot going on that wasn't already going on, but we do have a perfecting square between Venus and Chiron here. Again, I don't have the aspect turned on for Chiron, but you can see that Venus will be moving through that degree. There could be a sense of like unfairness or frustration with a situation or even with your own energies during this time. Venus could get easily really like triggered by Chiron here. Chiron's in Aries. Chiron's not really pulling punches here. It's like, look, you have wounds, you got to deal with them. And Venus in Cancer is not going to respond super well to that kind of energy. So issues of healing and hurting could definitely come up within relationships or even just within yourself. So just something to keep in mind. If you do get triggered during this time, for lack of a better term, then try and look at it as something to be able to kind of look at and work through, It may feel initially kind of unfair though. Or just hurtful, where it shouldn't necessarily have to be that way, because Chiron is trying to help. It's just that it can come in rather harsh ways with it being in Aries. So moving on to the 7th of July, the moon is moving into Leo now. It's going to be with Mercury there. What's interesting is it's going to be with Mercury and kind of triggering again as it moves through. I have this at 5:55. Let me move this back to noon now. The moon will be moving through these kind of degrees. It's going to be opposite to Pluto, conjunct to Mercury, and bringing this whole aspect up again. It's pretty much going to be a lot of the same issues that arose, that have been basically arising throughout the month already, this first week, with Mercury interacting with Pluto in this way. But it could bring things again to the fore. The moon tends to kind of spark off issues which have been kind of coming up again and again and again. Other than that, it's mostly just development of existing aspects. So we have the 8th of July is quite interesting and really, really nice. We have some awesome stuff going on in this day. There could be some mixed bag moments here with the moon making these square aspects to Mars and then Uranus. That's kind of interesting, but I do have good news. Much as there may be like this may be kind of physically uncomfortable during this part of the day, which should only be, maybe half the day, probably later in the day if you're in the US. They may be physically uncomfortable. Anger could arise. This could actually trigger up some energy levels. Be careful about accidents or trampling over others because this is very fixed energy. There's a strong stubbornness here. So try not to trample over others in this time. And yeah, just try not to be too stubborn. But what we do have today that's awesome is we have Mercury sextile to Jupiter with reception. So Mercury again is ruling Jupiter. And there's this sextile here. Any sort of ideas, conversations, collaboration, anything like that could go really, really well with this. It's a really optimistic transit because of the energies that it's bringing, Leo and Gemini, very optimistic signs. Earlier this month, when I was mentioning to try and kind of think through what are the conditions in your life that are frustrating you and how could you potentially change them in order to make things better, this is a day where I would really act upon that. So you've thought about it quite a bit in different kinds of ways. You've been dealing with the, the nodal way of looking at it, of is this my fate? Like, how do I change this? That kind of discomfort with the new moon and everything like that, really digging into these. We've been dealing with it with Pluto during this time, talking to Mercury, and then to Venus. We've had Venus talking to Saturn about this, kind of trying to look at it from all different angles. Today is really the best day to really try and put some energy toward any sort of insights that you've had around that, because this is, I would say that this is the best time to act on ideas that aren't developed, because you could get a lot of those, and you may not have follow through on it if you aren't completely certain that this is something that you want to do for a while. But anything that you have been wanting to do, this should give you a boost of energy around that. I'm going to pause real quick and grab some water. So just 1 second. Okay, we are back and I'm so much better now. All right, so what were we saying? When it comes to fresh ideas, you may not have follow through, but if it's something that you've wanted to do for a while, this should give you a lot of energy and inspiration and optimism that you may need, as well as energy and good ideas around anything that you're trying to pursue long term. This is also what I've written, a good time for a good time. This is definitely, in terms of days, especially, not only with this aspect, but we'll see going forward. This is like, if you want to have fun, if you want to go and do something, go see a show, go to the lake, go to the beach, go get some coffee with a friend, even just like relaxing at home. There should be a really pleasant energy around. So you should be having like a good time. You should be in a pretty good mood during this day. And this one should actually kind of provide a bit more of that surge of energy kind of thing going on here. We have some, more masculine energy or active, or however you want to put it, with the fire signs and the air signs coming through at this time. We do also have, beautifully, also perfecting this day, as I mentioned, Mercury is ruling Jupiter here. We have Saturn is also sextile to Uranus during this day. And did I say Saturn? Venus is sextile to Uranus this day. And Venus rules Uranus because it's in Taurus. So this is also really beautiful. It's also really optimistic. It's excited energy, but in a really pleasant way. So this could be like pangs of excitement, or I definitely assume it's not just me, where when you're doing something that you really like and you kind of get the flood of feeling of acknowledgement and conscious awareness of the fact that this is something that I really like and I'm really enjoying the fact that I'm doing this right now, you know. Those are kind of the energies that I would sense with this. It's a good time for meeting new people. It's a good time for trying new things because you will be very open-minded with this, with the interaction between Venus and Uranus and Mercury and Jupiter. You should have a really open mind during this time. Trust your instincts when it comes to others. Try not to make rash commitments. But other than that, if you're someone who tends to be a little bit more closed off toward new people, I would say try and let your guard down a bit and just rely on your instincts there, because there's a lot of, I don't think that there's too much that's untoward going on here. Sorry, now that I finally have the water, it's like, ugh. You should also really, like I said, going to see a show, going out to the lake or whatnot, there should be a really good ability to appreciate the arts and hobbies and things like that during this day. There should be a lot of feeling and excitement. So anything, again, that you enjoy, there's a heightening of that joy there. And nature, as well as the arts, should be able to be really strongly appreciated during this time. So let us move on to the 9th of July. There's not too much going on here, except for kind of a potential between alignment of feelings and thoughts. Two things I do want to point out. The moon is moving into Virgo today, so now ruled by Mercury here. We also have Mercury, Trine, and sextile to the nodes on this day. So it's sextile to the south node and trine to the north node. So that's why I say there's an alignment between thoughts and feelings. You're able to process your thoughts, or you're able to process your feelings kind of on an intellectual level today that should be really helpful, especially because you're obviously not going to be detached from your feelings. You still have a lot of energy in Cancer being ruled by the moon. But it's, I think, a really good idea to kind of try and look at your feelings without necessarily, not without feeling them, but on an intellectual level, to where you're kind of doing a little bit of self-analysis here, and trying to kind of look at how you feel about anything at all in your life during this time, and trying to kind of align that with, again, what you're trying to get and so forth, how maybe your feelings could be improved in order to make things just basically go smoother for you. But that's pretty much it for the 9th. On the 10th, we have something interesting playing out, which is, we're about to see, I'll pop it forward another day and see if it pops up. How tight do I have that? There we go. This is the aspect that I'm about to start talking about. I have it, I guess, yeah, it's a square, so I have it at like 8 degrees here of orb. And I'm about to start talking about it now because it's starting to come into play. So let me back us back up to the 9th. What I want to point out here is that we have a really interesting aspect here, an aspect pattern between the moon being opposite to Saturn and then square to Jupiter. And Jupiter is coming into that square aspect with Saturn as well. And the way that I felt about this when I kind of tried to play this out is this feels really kind of inquisitive toward Jupiter. There may be some things that come up of like, how practical has your action been? How much have you been taking advantage of Jupiter wherever it is in your chart, whatever house Gemini is in your chart? Have you been taking advantage of the energy of Jupiter here? Have you seen it pop up? Kind of consider it, look at it, see if you're taking advantage of it as well as you could be. You know, I don't just think of Saturn as a wet towel, but anything that Jupiter is slacking off on, or even if we are like not quite taking full advantage of it, that is something that Saturn will want to point out to us, and it might not do it in the way that we would like of, you know, just spelling it out, you know, somewhere for us to see and be like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, it may actually want to show you that you're not taking advantage of something by, for instance, someone else, you know, receiving an opportunity that maybe could have been yours if you had been focusing a little bit more on creating that opportunity for yourself. Things like this. So issues like that may come up during this time. So I feel like it's really asking you, how have you been taking advantage of Jupiter? Have you been? But also, if you've been taking too much advantage of Jupiter, that may also come up here. You know, if you've just been having fun and you haven't been putting, you know, practical plans into action of how to utilize this energy, that could also really come up during that time. So we have the 11th of July is another really interesting day. Pretty pleasant, quite pleasant. There are some really interesting aspect patterns that are playing out here, as you can kind of see. Yes, okay. We have a mystic rectangle as well as a grand trine, which is actually two kites. So let me try and show you all of these. So we have this mystic rectangle, which goes from Pluto here to the moon to Venus to Neptune and back to Pluto. So you can see that there's this rectangle here, right? And then you can see that there are these lines across in between, and these are oppositions. The moon is opposite to Neptune. Pluto is opposite now to Venus here. Venus is sextile to the moon, moon trine to Pluto, Pluto sextile to Neptune, and Neptune trine to Venus. So that is an aspect pattern that is really awesome and that I like a lot. But what this is also playing into is that this is actually kind of two kites, and I'll show you those. So we have this big old grand trine right in the middle here. It is out of element, which is interesting because we have it with end of Earth sign energy toward this first degree of Aquarius, but still very much an orb. And we have the kind of apices, or the apex here being Venus and the apex here being Neptune, of these kites, which is this part that also kind of jumps out on the top. You can see this kind of kite looking thing here. This is dynamic energy. This basically, when you get these kind of really beautiful structures playing out within the context of the aspect patterns between all of the different planets, that means that they're all pretty much in communication. They're each different aspect of energy is accessible from each other part. So the moon can access Uranus, it can access it directly because it's trying to it, or it can access it through Venus because both are sextile to Venus. It can access it through Pluto because they're both trine to Pluto. It can access it through Neptune because the moon is trine to Uranus and the moon is opposite to Neptune, and Neptune is sextile to Uranus. There, I had to catch myself up there at some point. But yeah, basically, like everything's interacting basically at this point. So there's a lot of different dynamic energy. You could have a lot that's going on. I don't think that this will necessarily feel very overwhelming. There's some really kind of cool aspects that are playing out specifically today that are really useful and like productive. I don't think we have any hard aspects perfecting today. No, we have 2 trines is all that are actually perfecting today, and they're both really nice. So let's look at those right after we look at Venus has just moved into Leo now. So as you'll notice, we have an exact opposition to Pluto because that's what happens to all these kids when they move straight into Leo. We do have, again, more desire for fun and excitement with this. This should be, again, a good time. This is like good times summer time, basically, you know, when everything starts moving into Leo. There is, what I've written here is like, there's a desire to either derive a sense of identity from certain relationships or to derive a sense of identity as being within certain relationships. So your sense of identity can really, with Venus moving in to Leo, which is in mutual reception to the sun, which is in, it's not in mutual reception. It's in reception to the sun, which is in Cancer. So the Leo energy is feeding into Cancer. There is, and it's also Venus. So there's this sense of needing to establish one's identity through one's own relationships. We also have, one could even take this to an extent where if they don't strongly identify with their relationships, they could kind of try and derive a sense of identity through one's scene or one's kind of, these are the people that I would like to be in relationships with. A sense of community around a certain identity type. So trying to think, I can, like, it's not escaping my mind. I recently told some people who liked emo and screamo music, they were asking me if I was ever into that. And I was like, not really, but I hung out with some scene kids back in the day, and they were just like cracking up like, oh man, scene kids, I haven't heard that term in ages. So it's like, you know, like being a scene kid and having your identity be that. It's not that you necessarily would love all other scene kids, but you have that kind of common identity. So that's what I'm kind of trying to get at. This could also play out, again, this is kind of similar in relation to deriving a certain sense of identity from the trappings of kind of conceptual identities. So again, through your wardrobe or through some sort of stylistic choice that one makes, or through I identify as belonging to this class, you know, and the kind of trappings of that. So, you know, feeling that you should have a nicer apartment because you identify with people of a certain class. You know, things like that can really come up with this dynamic where Venus in Leo is being ruled by the sun in Cancer. And this isn't an uncommon occurrence. This can often happen around this time of year. So, I mean, for instance, last year, it was around Leo season. I wouldn't be surprised if the planets were in similar position here when people started becoming obsessed with Stanley Cups and Barbie, you know, and stuff like that. So things like that, where there's an identification with Barbie, or there's an identification with a commodity of the Stanley Cup and what that means for your identity and how you feel about yourself, you know. If I haven't belabored that enough. We also have perfecting today. We will see it earlier than this because it's just passed. Venus perfecting its trine to Neptune. This is really beautiful because it was at the last degrees again, like we saw with Mercury, that it was perfecting that that trine with Pisces. Geez Louise. It was in the last degree of Cancer. And this kind of reinforces a lot of the above. There's kind of an idealization of form and aesthetic with this, to either kind of meld with how one wants to see oneself, or kind of to form oneself or form something of one's life into kind of an idealized form. There should be a strong sense of identification with and appreciation of the arts in one's relationships. So again, really strongly feeling into arts and relationships and one's position with others there in particular, because also with this, there is a bit of a shaky sense of belonging here. I think that this aspect can offer an attempt to mitigate some of this. And I find this whole dynamic here just really kind of interesting, even including Saturn in it. You know, there does seem to be a shaky sense of identity and a desire to form, to ameliorate that in some way for oneself. And there's nothing at all wrong with that. Even Pluto can help with that because it can really get at the root of what you feel like you're really desiring, or what's really missing for you, you know. We do also have at this time perfecting the Sun trine to Saturn. And what's interesting about this is, like I mentioned before, this is the Sun in Cancer, you know, trine to Saturn in Pisces. So this isn't standard Sun trine Saturn stuff. We've got these in like mushy water signs, you know, and I could say that because I'm Pisces. This isn't going to quite play out the way that one would necessarily expect. The motivation here, I think, is really personal. There's a willingness and a capability and an ease of work and productivity without a doubt, but it's not just for the sake of it. Especially once, I mean, that moon could give you a little bit of a sense of pride because the moon here is in Virgo. It could give you a bit of a sense of pride in the form of perfected work product, you know, that one can produce. But the motivation here is really emotional and relational. There could be a certain comfort and stoicism here too. So that's kind of a lot of the energy that I was getting earlier of like being willing to do whatever it takes, with the motivation being one's own family, one's own condition, and the condition of those that one really cares about. Yeah, so I did write here, the ideal situation with this would be one where you can find yourself in the context of productive interrelationships. So this is really cooperative here, potentially. But if one doesn't really feel that way with regard to their coworkers or whatnot, then that motivation coming from one's relationships is really strong here. So July 11th is definitely a significant day during this month. Switching to July 12th, we have the moon now in Libra. That's going to be conjunct to the south node. So we might see some kind of surprising, weird things popping up here, maybe things that were hidden at a certain point coming to light, or things being done in the dark right now, which may come to light either when the moon is about a quarter past where it is right now, in which case it'll be a little bit past actually full, or when it moves back to Aries. So this is a trigger point, basically. So we also have during this day the perfection of the Venus opposite Pluto aspect. And do notice we've been playing with this aspect pattern for a while. I don't think I've really pointed it out, but this isn't just an opposition. This is a bowl pattern. So what's all included here, I'll just do it point by point so that it's clear. Pluto is opposite to Venus, right? But Venus is sextile to these two guys here, Mars and Uranus. And then these guys are sextile to Neptune. And then Neptune is sextile to Pluto. So what we have is the opposition, and then we have all of the sextile points of that opposition are all filled in, and they're also creating trines. So trine from Venus to Neptune, trine from these guys hanging out here and causing ruckus up to Pluto here. So it's an aspect pattern. This means, like I was saying, where the energy can flow either directly or through others here. There's a lot of options for this energy to interplay, basically. And it does soften it, but it can also offer different routes if you're trying to avoid Pluto energy, which I wouldn't necessarily even recommend even trying to avoid it. It's definitely better to deal with it kind of head on. But yeah, so there's an emphasis with this specific pattern on like getting what you want, and there could be power struggles, therefore, within relationships when these two are in opposition to each other. We could have some manipulations here between these, and like I said, getting what you want, kind of not necessarily at any cost, because that's just so extreme, but at some cost, certainly, and maybe not just cost to yourself, so something to be careful of. And there could also be, with this, because we're dealing with light and shadow, really back and forth here quite a bit, we're dealing with the moon will have just run past in opposition to Neptune here. It's running straight into the south node. And then we've got Pluto and Venus playing around here. There could be some surprising events that unfold, things that weren't necessarily really expected, especially now with Venus and Pluto in aspect to these two, which are getting pretty close and are about, this is a ruckus right here. We're going to get more into it, but this is getting close. Keep this in mind. We're going to go over this in a few days worth of aspects, but this is really, really potent. This is becoming a super potent point. So surprises, I could really see some surprising things that people don't necessarily just expect straightforwardly looking at this, but when you look closer, there's some weird stuff going on here, basically. Let's see. There's also, I like this, is kind of interesting. We have additionally, Jupiter is now at that nodal point of 10 degrees. So Jupiter is going to be sextile to the north node and trine to the south node here. This is interesting. This could really indicate some sort of lucky breaks if this is hitting any sort of significant parts in your chart. So if you have something at 10 degrees, especially of any of these signs, especially of mutable or cardinal signs here, then this could be quite significant. You could wind up having some sort of weird little lucky break during this time. Even if it's luck in disguise or a blessing in disguise, the nodes can play out that way as well, where there's something that it's like, oh, damn, like, what now? And it turns out what now is quite nice, There is a spirit with this of fairness and justice. Jupiter rules the justice system, but it also does rule fairness. It is, there's an order to it, So even if things seem to pop up, again, with this here, there's something really fortunate about this, especially if your chart is getting more triggered by this 10-degree point than it is by these late degrees of the fixed signs points. So let's see, yeah. And again, Jupiter being justice and fairness, that can go either way, It is for justice, So if you've been being not super nice in a situation, then this could really represent some just desserts, So just kind of keep that in mind. So be nice, basically. Deserve nice things by being nice. So we have this next day, the 13th. The moon will eventually be moving into Scorpio during this time. And that, I think, what that's going to do when it does, I'm going to put this on hours and mess with this a little bit to show you. Okay. So when we scoot this over here, this is now, we're at the 14th. That was my aiming day, right? Oh, no, I think I pushed this toward, I'm so sorry. Jeez Louise. I'll get used to this eventually. We are currently building toward Sun opposite Pluto. I just wanted to point that out. And then Mercury square Mars and Uranus during this day. So notice that these are starting to build up. They're not super pleasant, but we're going to have to deal with them in turn as they perfect. These can be some major flashpoints. So potentials for anger, potentials for kind of explosive energy, definitely coming through, and we'll discuss that more. But let's go here. So here's another kind of trigger point, for lack of a better word, popping up when the moon moves into, see, I didn't even have to mess with the hours. I could have just like left it at noon and it would have been perfectly fine. Here between Venus and Pluto. So remember, we have these two are in opposition. We now have the moon at the midway point there. So any sort of like I said, power struggles within relationships that popped up with Venus opposite to Pluto, those could really come to a head at this point, especially during the hours close to whatever would be around 7 a.m. or not 7 a.m. Yeah, around 7 a.m. of Universal Time. So around those early morning hours, Universal Time, definitely be careful with your words, with your feelings. Try not to be rash here. There's a huge amount of rash energy. here, and this could really turn into some serious fights. Like, this could turn into like kind of worst case scenario stuff when it comes to any sort of personal or interpersonal relationships, or even someone who just pisses you off. I would expect for irrational people, like those who we share a planet with, who just happen to be like, quite irrational and do kind of crazy things sometimes, for those things to start popping up during these days pretty strongly. So you may see an increase in car wrecks. You may see an increase in fighting, and just really like people snipping at each other quite a bit during this time. It's definitely nothing to sneeze at. And keep in mind, this has been building. It's getting triggered by the moon on this day, but it's really from the 13th forward for a bit. So jumping to the 15th here, we're definitely building toward that Jupiter square Saturn here energy. They're also, notice, they're both in what's called mutual application. So Jupiter is in earlier degrees than Saturn, right? Jupiter's moving forward. Saturn's moving backwards. So it's not just that one planet is like catching up to another. It's that they're both moving toward the same kind of point. And that exact aspect will be much later. I have down here the 19th of August, and I think that that's correct. But they're continually building. That's what I want to point out here, is that this aspect will be with us throughout that whole time. We do also have now Mercury really, again, square this Mars-Uranus conjunction here. Oh, and with this square, try not to worry about it. If you're not like screwing around a bunch with your life, and no offense if you are, we've all been there. But Jupiter is ruling Saturn here, because Jupiter rules the sign of Pisces. So it really doesn't have to be a problem. There's just a very strong karmic energy there, is really how I'm seeing this. And as long as we've been trying to be good and nice, then we shouldn't worry about it too much. Just try and really be productive. Try not to sleep on opportunities that come up, but also try not to be, too over the top optimistic about things. Keep your head on straight, but try and not worry, because this, to me, it doesn't feel bad. It just feels like it's getting done some stuff that's really necessary to do. So if you're kind of standing in the way of that in your own life, in general, like interpersonally, that's really the only way that I could see this really, pushing on you and changing things for you, basically. So we will get to the obvious here in a second, but we do also have the sun is now square to Chiron here. So issues could come to light that need to be dealt with. And anything that you've been avoiding dealing with, it would be wise to look at it during this time. So now that brings us to, in my opinion, the biggest aspect of the month. Mars conjunct Uranus here in Taurus. Now this is going to be ruled by Venus, which is over here in Leo. So continually worth keeping in mind that the things that happen to Venus here are also relevant to these two guys, but which, keeping in mind, like, that's Pluto there. This is just really explosive. Uh, it's really explosive on a literal and metaphorical level here. We could literally see uh, strong increase of issues with fire. A lot of this is going to be affecting earthly matters and things lower to the ground, with it being in Taurus. Taurus also rules farms. It rules some countries, Russia, Iran, Poland, among others. Those could be major flashpoints. But anything regarding farmland, especially with regard to fires or explosions, hopefully not gas pipelines, which are, underneath the earth. Anything that's subterranean could be a major issue with this. This would be issues of fires, explosions, breakages, storms. We could have, certainly, this could potentially indicate some sort of volcanic activity, hopefully not. But that would be a little like extremely on the nose for Mars conjunct Uranus in Taurus. This could also be Martial. Really, hopefully not. But, um, you know, this could have something to do with just something very weird or extremely escalatory. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word. A strong escalation occurring in one of the conflicts that is occurring. This is also sextile to, again, the Sun and Neptune. It's at the apex of this aspect pattern here. So that can offer some, if you're dealing with this energy, you can channel that energy away from the conjunction, hopefully toward maybe kind of weird but authentic expression, expressing it via the sun, or this could also just be talking something out. I know it's not Mercury, but bringing it to light, any sort of weird feelings that you're having with something. Or this could also be affecting, geopolitically, the sun is leaders. So there could be major issues with leadership. I'm trying to think. I don't know which leaders are Cancers or have really strong Cancer in their chart. I don't think that it's U.S. leaders. And I think that with regard to Russia, Putin has strong Libra. So that is a cardinal thing. But it could play out with regard to national leaders. Cancer is strongly associated with the U.S. because the U.S. obviously July 4th has its sun in Cancer. But we then also have this potentially, you can channel this through Neptune as well. And the way that I see that is kind of through Neptune and Pisces dealing with something like this is probably going to deal with it in a somewhat ironic way. Like I said, with this kind of weird expression, the way that you would have to deal with this energy would just be to kind of have a laugh about it. Because otherwise it could get violent, it could get explosive, it could get argumentative. There is a huge potential for big breakthroughs, especially with regard to any sort of earthly technologies. So any sort of energy related technologies, things like that. But those are things that tend to happen behind the scenes. They're really excellent. They're wonderful. We don't know about them for a little while before they're on the market or whatever. And it's just kind of in retrospect that we're able to look back at oh, that was a beautiful breakthrough, but also, this popped off in public and that was what we were focused on at the time. There could be beefs popping up during this time. Obviously, I feel like everyone's got, beefs right now. But that's the kind of thing that you would see around this. And this would also be I definitely can't emphasize enough that it would be shocking and surprising. Whatever pops off from this will be surprising. But yeah, keeping really in mind, I am obviously talking to you from Oklahoma, so I'm not thrilled about the kind of storms that this could potentially imply. And, you know, we also tend to, because of fracking, which is, deep drilling for gas, we tend to get a lot of earthquakes here. That could be another potential from this, but it could be kind of anything with that. The fact that we do have also the sun and moon in water signs, as well as this really expressing itself through water signs here. Hopefully not, as well as the water bearer. Hopefully not too much water related crises or whatnot. But I think that's most of what I wanted to say about that. We do also simultaneously have Mercury is in conjunct. I don't have my in conjuncts or my minor aspects, which I love, but I don't have them highlighted on charts like this. So we have in conjunct here aspect. So just kind of worth keeping in mind. This could really scatter the energy. You probably won't be super focused on what you typically are focused on. Let me put it that way. This could be something that would really distract a lot of people from just work, things like that. I see definitely a distraction energy there with these two being in conjunct. Or even like the mundane things of life are distracting you from looking at the exciting thing that you want to be looking at, So moving on from that stuff. On the 16th of July, notice we're getting a lot more red. This is why I said that sadly July 1st looks like it's about the least of our problems, kind of. So on the 16th of July, we do have a T-square with, yes, here is Mercury is at the apex, and we have the moon opposite to, ugh. The more I look at that, the more I'm like, ugh. We have Mercury at the apex of a T-square with the moon opposite to this massive Uranus and Mars here. This could also be another kind of trigger point here. We've got, the moon tends to really heighten any sort of strong energy that's occurring at a certain point. And the fact that it's coming into opposition with this so quickly is a little bit unsettling. I would also expect for everything that I said yesterday, bleeding into certainly today. This could be a trigger point here. And then we have that also square to Mercury here. So there could be a sense of disbelief here with whatever is occurring and happening, like a sense of not wanting to believe that something could be the case. I mean, I don't want to scare. This is literally just what I'm kind of seeing in the planets here. So basically that energy of the 15th is going into the 16th, but it's also to a weird extent, even though the aspect is already perfected, it's heightening in the days that follow. So we have this aspect is getting a lot closer now on the 17th, and we have the moon fortunately entering Sagittarius now. It will come into an opposition with Jupiter, but that's fine. This is nice energy. This might be like the big old laugh that is needed, in the aftermath of whatever this is. This is good energy here. This should be lightening things up quite a bit. I don't know if this is becoming memes now or what, but looks like we're laughing about whatever that is. And yeah, just this is getting heightened. this is arguments right here, this square. Let me jump straight to where that perfects. So this is actually going to perfect on the full moon. What I have here, and I definitely full-heartedly agree with this, I kind of would say from the 7th on, there's big watch your words energy going on, because there's going to be a lot of words said, and they're not going to all be nice, and they may have some lasting effects, especially considering the involvement of these kind of outer planets in stuff during this time. With Jupiter and Saturn are definitely in conversation and negotiating with each other. And then we have Uranus getting, huge time triggered by Mars here. And then, Pluto is dealing with these inner communication relationship planets. It's of kind of the utmost importance that you watch your words during this month. I'm actually kind of already practicing that going into things, because there's I don't want this to sound like I'm into anything shady, but there are certain things that are going on in my life. Broadly speaking, a lawsuit, which is a class action, and so when I'm in communication with other members of the class, I do need to be careful about my words, because I don't want to influence whether they might sign on to something or their answers to certain questions and things like that. So I am, fully abstaining from any sort of directive language, because I know that when you're dealing with matters of the law, all of that can be subpoenaed, and that could cause issues for us broadly, and I don't want to do that. So being as hands-off as possible with things like this, I think are really significant, and it's really important during this time that you be as hands-off as you possibly can, because there will certainly be times during this where you can't help it, and you do just kind of speak kind of out of turn. There's just too much potential for speaking out of turn. It will happen. Just try and minimize it, So there is also, if you can put aside any sort of stubbornness, there's potential for huge insights during this time. Probably also on a social level. I don't think it's a big secret that, basically collectively, people in various countries, certainly in the US, there's kind of this weird collective dialogue going on of how to process the fact that we don't really feel like we have a lot of input in, the democratic process at this point. And, we do make memes about it. We try and joke about it. We try and comfort each other with kind of, ironic communications about it, like even, overblowing the extent to which things are pressingly, like, really not great, So there may be kind of some insights into each other on a collective level through trying to process all of the things that we're being presented with, collectively, processing that all together, and maybe some insights and some new ways that people are learning kind of how to interact with each other as people who are all affected by these major events outside of ourselves, and feeling like we don't have the level of control that we should have over our own affairs because of these external circumstances and so forth. But I think that that's pretty much what I had for the 17th. On the 18th, we do have a perfecting sextile between Uranus and the Sun. So things, whatever happened just prior, there's probably a lot of stuff that's coming to light, pardon, about that during this time. Again, sudden insights, ideas, breakthroughs. Also, one thing that I really felt about this is potential sudden realignments of certain people. So potentially people taking positions on matters that one wouldn't necessarily expect. So this would be surprising, but it would be kind of a realignment of leaders, in particular with this being the sun. So possibly due to some sort of fallout of whatever this has been. But I do really see that in here, in all of this energy of potential realignment, you know. We do also have during this day, Mercury is trine to Chiron. Yes. So we do have access to kind of better understanding of any issues and problems that we're dealing with. Again, this could be a strong coping mechanism coming in handy at this time. And it may be less difficult to look at or think about certain things that may be more along the lines of things that you want to avoid either psychologically or emotionally or whatever during other times typically. So on the 19th of July, we have the moon entering Capricorn, and it is going to be leading up to a T-square again, like I was saying with the nodes here. So this was the point at which that I was referring to when the nodes were kind of triggered last time, like when the sun was at this midpoint. This would be another trigger point for those energies. So if something pops up that is of great interest to you during that previous nodal access period, keep in mind that this July 19th may lead to some developments on that front. On the 20th, let's see, we're moving up to a full moon. That's going to be tomorrow. We have Mars entering Gemini today. So let me go ahead and scooch this just so we can actually see it. This should kind of, if you've been feeling stuck during the time that Mars has been in Taurus, which is one of pretty much its least favorite place to be. It's probably gotten a little bit easier since Venus has moved into Leo, but I mean, that's neither here nor there, because when Venus was ruling Mars and was in the sign of Mars's fall, in addition to being in the sign of like Mars itself being in the sign of its own detriment, I mean, that's a whole mess. Pretty much the whole month leading up to this point where Venus finally moved into to Leo has probably been of the utmost frustration for Mars. That should really kind of be getting unstuck during this time. We're getting again more into that, I'll go with active energy of the air and fire signs. So things are speeding up a bit during this time. It's less about comfort and more about socializing and getting out there and getting into kind of dynamic interactions with people, especially around any sort of communications or mental efforts. There should be some unsticking of the energy here now. There will be increased communication, probably increased short trips. If you are going to be making some short trips, I would say that this also includes any sort of commuting. Be careful about any sort of accidents with Mars and Gemini during this time. There is potential for argumentation. I personally also, just to go into my chart a little bit more, I personally have both Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. My Jupiter is at 0 degrees and my Mars is at 2 degrees. When I was younger, I could argue very much like a lawyer, and I wouldn't have to give up because I would eventually wind up, winning. There could be some of that energy here, certainly I could see where people may want to argue for one out of the sake of a specific cause, especially with the interaction of Jupiter and Saturn here between Gemini and Pisces, as well as this Neptune in Pisces. These two, I mean, being in Gemini here, there could be a cause here. There could be something really that one is arguing, for the sake of or whatnot. But it could also really simply be because one is interested in the debate, in the dialogue, basically, and in trying to kind of reconcile differing viewpoints. People who have this kind of alignment, and I certainly feel this with Jupiter and Mars in Gemini. As a natal thing, this position argues with itself way more than it's going to argue with anyone else. It's really interested in looking at every side of a situation. So if you don't typically do that, if you tend to just kind of be within your own worldview and look at the world that way, this may actually kind of trip you up. I don't personally, like on an experiential level, know how other people would deal with this energy, just because this is second nature to me at this point. But this is really going to force people to look at other people's viewpoints and take them on, just as significant a standing as one's own, and really analyze, like, okay, what are the merits here? What are the merits here? Is there any overlap here where we can find some sort of compromise? Because Mars with Jupiter in Gemini is also going to look for a compromise, certainly. It's not just about fighting. What it's about, the reason that it fights is, one, it's trying to test its own viewpoints and the strength of its own ideas. But it's also, if there's a cause, it can be a little bit more martial and a little bit more like, no, even if I think that I'm faltering on this one point, I know that the underlying justice of the situation is with this kind of worldview. So I'm going to argue it as a whole and maybe not note that there's a slippage in, that. I'm just going to kind of focus on, maybe another way. It can be tricky like that, it's a very dynamic mental energy. But do note that this thing is going to really bring to your attention any sorts of faults in your own worldview and your own perspective. So if that shakes you, then, I don't really know what to tell you because I live with this. So, yeah, we have that Mars entering Gemini. We have Mars also, just as it's moving into this, is sextile to Neptune in Pisces. This should be rather pleasant. It's kind of holding Mars's hand into the transition here. If you do have any sort of substance abuse issues there, it might be worth kind of keeping in mind. But if you don't, then I don't think it should really be much of an issue. There will be, with that sextile, though, kind of a strong desire to anything that's boring or heavy or just not interesting. Like I said, these planets down here in Gemini, these want to be in dialogue. They want to be in dynamic situations. They want to be dealing with stuff, especially social stuff. There's going to be a desire to get away from anything that's just boring or repetitive with no actual reason behind doing it, or at least that's not certainly tangible to oneself. It's not a great time for repetitive tasks unless you're able to daydream meanwhile, or to, formulate ideas in your head while you're doing something repetitive. Then it's fine. And then you should actually be very effective with your hands here. Mars and Jupiter, but also do be careful with your hands, especially the whole time that Mars is in Gemini. Your hands and your arms and your mouth and your speaking apparatuses, because there could be injury with Mars there. So just be careful with those areas. Like I was saying, with the commuting and everything, it's the same rules apply also to the parts of the body that are ruled by Gemini. So yeah, one thing I wrote here is with Mars moving into Gemini and also sextile to Neptune, someone may actually kind of get their facts wrong and yet insist on arguing their point. So definitely double check the things that you say, but also double check the things that you hear, because you may be getting some bad data there with Neptune and Pisces sextile to this Mars as it's moving into Gemini. We do also have Venus in flowing aspect to the node. So Venus is sextile to the south node and trine to the north node. This probably won't really be felt, but if these are hitting personal points for you, this could represent a significant relationship or a significant change in one's physical appearance, one's sense of self-worth, especially around things like appearances and relationships and so forth. Potentially also could be beneficial to finances if it's in a strong point in your chart. But let us move to the 21st, where we have our second Capricorn full moon. Let me move this ahead a bit. I have this at 5 p.m. It needs to be why is it saying AM? Because I'm still on the 20th, and because I'm on hours. I just confused myself so much there. All right, so, and then we're going to do this and move this to AM here. Okay. So, as you see, we have this full moon here. This is a blue moon because it's the second full moon of the Cancer season, which means it's the second Capricorn full moon. It is happening early in the morning here. Let me actually just put the actual time in. Let me get it exact. Come on, buddy. Okay. Oh, wait, yeah. Okay. So it's 5:16 a.m. Central Daylight Time. So this is going to be happening around midnight of Universal Time. And by midnight, I mean, like, say, 12:01 a.m. On the 21st. So this will be happening on the... if you're much farther behind, right, because we're plus, I don't know, you can figure out the time. We're +5, so it's happening at some point at your time. So we have the moon is obviously on Pluto. We have this applying the sextile to Neptune, as it has been. We also have it applying this trine to Mars. And then we do also have that Mars square to Uranus perfecting today. And Uranus is, of course, still conjunct to Mars. So there's a lot of energy here, and it's kind of weird. I would expect this to be kind of... the way I experience full moons in general is as a kind of chaotic, overwhelming energy, where things kind of go a little wonky. I tend to encounter more like road rage people around me. When I see full moons pop up, I'm always telling myself, like, okay, when you go out the door, be careful driving and things like that. And things just tend to go wonky people tend to be like more emotionally reactive and things like that. So I would expect for that to be heightened even more so than a normal full moon with this. That Pluto there, this could also be a major issue geopolitically. And in world events, with Pluto involving itself here, with really all of the outer planets, are just all up in the business of this full moon. I mean, we've got Uranus, Neptune here. We have Pluto right on it. And then we have this aspect is getting close, and this aspect is getting pretty close. Really, the only one here that's not super affected is Venus, which has only this one really beautiful aspect that it's making here in a sextile to Jupiter. So relationships should be relatively safe from this, but I would kind of expect for things to be a little bit weird in the world during this day. We might see. This would have to do probably with leadership, some leadership shifts or changes, especially anyone who has again positions that are close to these points here, and just probably surprising weird communications, maybe things that are kind of confusing initially during this time. We do have Pluto really getting close to moving back into Capricorn during this time too. And it just feels very weird. I would expect for the energy to be just quite intense. And I find this, to just use the words that I'm actually feeling, I find this full moon to be really annoying. I think it's just gonna, it will probably harken back to some extent to things that happened during the first full moon in Capricorn, the one that happened last month around this time. But I just think that this is just going to be kind of annoying, if I'm honest. So try and keep it in check. There's definitely less anger here in the communication, and more just what, and kind of shocking communication that's occurring, because during this day we do also have the perfection of this square of Mercury to Uranus that's been building. And like I said, I chased this square from Mercury to Mars. I chased it out for a little while, and it's well into August or beyond. Mars is going weirdly fast. And it's going too fast for Mercury to catch up with it just now. And Mercury typically is extremely fast. So that's kind of interesting that basically it's almost like Mercury is always just chasing that square point with Mars, but it can't quite catch up with it, which is very interesting. So yeah, we should have potentially a volatile time, but I think more so just really off-putting during this day with this Mercury square Uranus. Definitely repeating that watch your words during this time. There is potential, again, for insights if one can put aside their stubbornness. But again, what we have today is Venus sextile to Jupiter. This is just really nice. This is both of the benefic planets in sextile to each other, so both supporting each other, and they're both in active signs, so they should be providing a certain level of encouragement to each other. This isn't just like, oh, lay back and relax and enjoy the pleasant, aspect. It's more accessible than that. It's more of an active sense of joy and enjoyment. So I feel like this is going to be represented in things that are somewhat separate from, especially because, like I mentioned, with um, Jupiter and Venus neither of them are in aspect really to the sun or to the moon here. They're also out of orb from Pluto. I don't think that this has really anything to do with the big annoying stuff of the day. I think that this is a nice little respite that we have that's probably compartmentally completely different. So that should be quite pleasant. It should really soften the edges. There's potential for some indulgence in pleasures during this time. But you could also, if these are important points, this 12-degree mark pretty much in your chart, say in fixed signs or in mutable signs, look for some strong, this is actually exactly on my ascendant, which is my rising sign is Gemini. So I like that. I actually didn't notice that before. Look for some really big luck. This is extraordinarily lucky aspect if your chart is getting triggered at the 12-degree point of either Gemini or not Gemini, mutable signs or fixed signs. So very just super pleasant, very lucky aspect there. It is overshadowed. I will say, like, there's no doubt that whatever really pleasant, nice thing this is, there's a much bigger thing, possibly context, that is not related to it, but is very annoying. And that's probably going to take most of your focus for the day, sadly. So moving to the 22nd, in our last week here of July, we have the sun moving into Leo, very fitting. It's now in its domicile, so it is now ruling Venus and Mercury from its own sign, which also then strengthens these two. This should just be like really pleasant to have these energies here. I mean, typically they are during this time of year. So if you tend to like the mid-late summer time, then you'll probably like this. We have that as sextile to, or trine to Neptune just before it moves in, right out of Cancer. So this should again be just a really pleasant feeling. It's feeling more personal on an individual level, though, with the sun making this aspect. So you should just be kind of feeling kind of a little bit at ease with yourself from that aspect in particular, even as the sun is coming into that exact opposition with Pluto. So if you are a fan of any sort of shadow work, this is a really good time to look at yourself. And I think it's going to be a lot easier and more comfortable for you to do that really at this time where you're able to work through Neptune on the way there. This is, of course, also then therefore sextile to Mars. Did we already discuss that? We should have. I think I completely somehow did not write that aspect up. Yeah, we have Sun sextile to Mars here. That's very pleasant, good energy. As far as that goes, you'll be able to get things done. You should be able to really focus pretty strongly, pretty well. Gemini can tend to scatter that a little bit, but I think you're going to do just fine with the Sun in Leo there. Otherwise, I mean, this is actually looking like a much more pleasant day than I kind of initially thought, because we have still this Venus Jupiter sextile in the same sign that we also have the Mars Sun sextile. So I think on a personal level, like in our own personal lives, we're feeling pretty good. If there's been some weird stuff that has happened in the world recently, or even with strangers, people we don't know, like road rage things, stupid stuff, that could be really heightened during the past day or so. But I think on a personal level that it's actually been feeling pretty okay, and actually quite nice the past couple days. So this should be another pleasant day, the 22nd. Moving into the 23rd, we have the moon is moving into Pisces this day. We move this back to noon. Sorry, this text field is quite annoying. Okay. Moving this toward noon, we have Pisces moving into, or the moon moving into Pisces. We have a T-square here that I've made note of, which has as its apex these old guys here, these old troublemakers, between the moon and Mercury. So that's quite interesting and definitely potentially also somewhat volatile. You could definitely channel this energy productively. So any sort of mental work could go pretty okay, especially just before the moon moves into Pisces when it's still in Aquarius. This could offer some really interesting mental energy, which you could make some serious productive use out of and come up with some really interesting insights and maybe different ways of doing things than you have before. But it could also be a little bit volatile at a certain point. So, just being careful of that. Again, we have that sun opposite to Pluto, so we could be like uncovering things. This is basically the sun is bringing light to Pluto, so it could be uncovering things like secrets, abuses, any sort of problems, things that people aren't comfortable with that aren't really couth, could be potentially bringing light to that. The sun it's interesting, different from Mercury coming into this opposition and then Venus. The sun is in its domicile when it's addressing Pluto right now. And so it really doesn't have anyone else to answer to. And so it's kind of interesting that it almost feels like Pluto rather than acting upon, all of these different planets, when it's dealing with the sun in this position, it really looks to me like Pluto is having to answer to the sun much more than anything else. The sun obviously doesn't have anyone to answer to. It's in its home. It's fine. It's in a strong degree. And it's dealing with Pluto, which has potentially been hiding some things and probably has. Those things would be coming to light now in the full light of day, basically here. Because again, it's like when we think of these positions, this is almost like the full Pluto position from the sun. Like if this was the moon, it would be a full moon. It's bringing light to Pluto. Pluto is on the exact opposite side of the sun from our perspective when this happens. Potential psychological insights also on a personal level. Shadow work, excellent during this. One thing is with the moon moving into Pisces with this, definitely avoid any sort of self-sabotage with this, because let's say somehow you have a very strong Pluto in your chart, or that in your context, somehow Pluto's getting the upper hand here. There could be, if Pluto were to have the upper hand in this situation, it would have a lot of control here, basically. So just basically try to avoid, especially with Neptune in the mix with all of the planets as they move through this point, definitely try to avoid self-sabotage with anything, Try not to act rashly with the communication that's happening here with this T-square as well. So that's the warning, but otherwise I would say there's stuff probably coming to light, and you could utilize this for any sort of psychological work that you might want to do, or any sort of investigative work things like that, digging into things, basically. And yeah, identity or personality conflicts could become really overblown during this point. So watch out for any of that kind of really blowing up, like really out of proportion during this time. So moving to the 24th, we have the moon is now conjunct Saturn square Jupiter. So that's kind of interesting. That is heightening this aspect a bit, even though it's not. We're still like 5 degrees off, and I think it's like, what did I say? I think I said before that it's at some point in like mid-August when these are exact. This is just a really important aspect, and so the lead up to it tends to be even wider often than the orbs that I've used. So the moon is kind of getting involved here. There's probably more of a kind of an emotional attachment to wanting to see things done correctly, the way that things should be. There's kind of, I think, an attachment to that at this point, which is perfectly fine and healthy. But there is more of a personal attachment to the agenda of Jupiter Saturn, which is fairness. It's order. It's things being as they ought to, So let's see here. I want to go back here real quick because there's a couple things I do want to point out about when the sun moves into Leo. At this point, if you want to consider Neptune to be the ruler of Pisces, which I don't, I take Jupiter as the ruler of Pisces, but to some extent you could say that it's in its domicile when it's in Pisces. The sun is also in its domicile when it's in Leo. So this trine, as it's widening out of sign, but still within orb, they're both really on their own turf. So if you do need to do anything expressive, creative, if you are an artist, basically, this should be a really good time to work on those things. And we do also with this Mars-Pluto trine that's also occurring on this day. I don't know how, I realized that I somehow overlooked this in my sheet. This is really significant too. This is strong power here. You could channel this in a lot of really productive and good ways, but there could be a really passive-aggressive edge here, and it would be utilizing words and ideas and sparring with regard to words and ideas as it's formed from Gemini to Aquarius here. There could be a battle of minds, battle of wits playing out here. But there is a big potential for being able to accomplish some major tasks and to see things through with that. So I'm sorry, I don't know how I overlooked that. So moving on to the 25th. If the moon is moving into Aries, so it's going to be conjunct to the North Node, again triggering the lunation periods that I've pointed out so far. So I think the last one was, it would have been about like 5 days prior. If things pop up, this is what I'm trying to point out here basically is when the moon meets these points or squares these points, if something happens that's significant, continue to look at these points and the squares to these points to see developments with those things. So this is usually more of a personal life thing, but it can play out like Iran striking back Israel for having killed some of its it's military personnel that were in Syria during the eclipse. And then there was a planet that hit the eclipse point, and Raisi then wound up dying in the helicopter crash. So it's a spark point, and then there's developments which build onto it, and also the whole war, the whole attack on Palestine, basically. The trigger point was the invasion of the settlements from Gaza, which also occurred during a eclipse. And so it was, it's this whole thing with Israel-Palestine has been playing out on these eclipse points. So when the moon or sun hits these points, or they hit the square points to these points, that's when there tend to be significant developments which build upon. That's what you're looking for. And that's why it may sound like I'm being vague about what this actually means. It's because it doesn't mean one thing. It's a development point of things that have happened at the last point. So that's what I wanted to point out there. We have the 25th, Mercury entering also Virgo today, a little bit after noon my time. So it'll be moving into its domicile. It rules not only Gemini, but also Virgo. So there could be, at least mentally, a lot more energy toward consideration of others and deference a little bit more to others once Mercury is moving into Virgo. Communications, thoughts will become a lot more straightforward, more focused on mundane and on details and on accuracy. So this should help Mars to be more honest in the things that it's putting forth, even as it's about to move into a square with it, when it does move in. They'll both be ruled by Mercury, so it should be fine. This is a really good time to do any mental work, especially that square between those with Mars being in Gemini now, and then with Mercury moving into Virgo. Even though that square isn't going to perfect, it's actually going to become, I think, useful. It can lead to some argumentation, but it's nothing really explosive that I see. We're moving beyond this Uranus point. I think it's really going to help bring kind of a dynamic energy to oneself, one's own ideas, and one's own energy. And it's going to enable you to do much more accurate, precise work, correct work, So not only are you doing your work, but you're doing it well, So that's all I have for the 25th. For the 26th, we now have, we have that moon near the nodes still. We have the sun is sextile to Mars here, exact, which is, again, really nice. That's been kind of forming and building here. This is just really good energy. You're probably feeling pretty strong within yourself. This is a period of time, or basically a scenario, a transit under which one wouldn't really question their own identity or need to necessarily peg it onto others. You should be feeling pretty secure and strong within yourself and your own ideas, your own worldview, especially if you've been kind of developing that with that kind of dynamic energy of questioning oneself. If things are checking out for you right now, that, like, in terms of being correct, and standing up to your own scrutiny of yourself and your own ideas, which is definitely a productive thing to be doing with these energies, then you should be feeling really strong within yourself at this point. It should be feeling pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, any fun activities should be going over really well with all of this. And you're not going to become, with Mercury moving into Virgo is helpful here because it's gonna put the reins on things a little bit. Things shouldn't get too out of hand with those energies. We also have Chiron is stationing retrograde here. So any issues that have come up since the past several months I'm so sorry. Chiron retrograde. Let me look at when that last occurred. It looks like it was last year for about half the year, 23rd of July to 26th of November, it looks like 2023 is what I'm seeing. So for the past 6 months, it's been direct. And you may kind of need to reconsider, go over any kind of personal issues which have arisen over this past period of time as it goes retrograde. So let's see. This will be retrograde also until the 30th of December. So we're on a pretty tight schedule with Chiron going retrograde for 6 months, about every 6 months. So let's see here. Yeah, there may be kind of an unwelcome sense of things that you regret, that upset you. Things that you may have been avoiding may also pop up during that time. So on the 27th, we have the moon moving into Taurus. We do have a T-square forming between the sun, the moon, and Pluto, which is interesting. Again, this is, I mean, the sun should really have the upper hand here. It shouldn't go too wonky, but I mean, there are definitely potentials for power plays here. There's potentials for hurt feelings out of that. There's even, because I see now Venus is kind of moving with an orb of a square with Uranus here. There's potential for words to hurt now, because we have this Uranus is squaring both Venus and Mercury. We also have Mars in the mix there. This is where the Mars square Mercury could get a little bit weird. Potential for hurt feelings over words that have been offered in a manner which was potentially a power play, and things possibly that should not have been said. Being said and being hurtful potentially during this time. So just kind of, again, I'll be a broken record for this month at least. Definitely watch your words during this time, because people could definitely have their feelings hurt. There's really not much new or significant to say unique to the 28th. So moving into the 29th, we have the moon will be moving into Gemini. Eventually, on the next day, what we'll see is the moon will be conjunct to Mars and then Jupiter. The day before the 29th, it'll be conjunct Uranus. But yeah, other than the moon's movements, you can see we're getting fewer and fewer aspect lines here. We're also getting preponderance of red rather than blue, like we started the month with. Blue is the trines and the sextiles, the flowing aspects that tend to be a little easier and nicer. We're getting a lot more of the red squares and oppositions, which tend to be a little bit more dynamic and challenging. But yeah, other than that, we have Venus is square or trine now to Chiron. So relationship issues that may have arisen, say like, when we had the that stuff going on, that may be more accessible during this time. Healing with regard to that, if something went kind of like a little bit weird in the past few days, today would be a good day to revise the situation with Chiron in retrograde. But issues of self-worth could arise in a positive way here. It is a trine. It's very helpful. We have Venus and Leo. We have Chiron and Aries. These are kind of like, man, I don't even care, what you think, kind of placements. So if there are any issues of self-worth, you should be able to really work through those today, and not like maybe in a way that would prevent those from holding you back as much as they have previous. But yeah, that is everything that I have. Again, just to run through the most pleasant day is going to be, sadly, again, the 1st probably of July. There's some really nice aspects that do come out throughout the month. We have on the 3rd of July, Venus trine Saturn, that being from Cancer to Pisces. We have the 8th of July, Mercury sextile to Jupiter with reception, Jupiter in Mercury's sign. On the 8th of July, we also have Venus sextile Uranus with reception, that meaning Uranus is in Venus's sign. On the 11th of July, we have Venus trine to Neptune with reception, because Neptune, not only is it in what some people consider to be its domicile, but it's in the sign of Venus's exaltation. So that's really extra beautiful. We also have on the 11th of July, the Sun trine Saturn, very productive aspect there, but not quite in the way that one might consider, because again, this is another Cancer to Pisces trine. On the 21st of July, we have Venus sextile to Jupiter. And then on the 26th of July, we have the Sun sextile to Mars, with the Sun in its own sign. We do also have, worth mentioning, I'm not going to call this pleasant, on the 22nd of July, we have Mars trine Pluto. That's the one. It's so funny that I put this under worth mentioning, and then when I was going through the dates, I somehow overlooked like half of July 22nd. But yeah, so Mars trine Pluto is interesting. It's potent. Like the key word for it would be that it's potent. It is very powerful planets, very active planets, very, they can be self-serving planets. These are both of the rulers of Scorpio, if you take Pluto as a ruler of Scorpio. So it's very driven energy, and it's very much, the energy is very much availing itself to Pluto. So one's own energy is definitely, if you take this purely on a personal level, availing itself to one's power. So you're very much able to channel your drive into, whatever it is that you're really, really wanting to accomplish. But it can very much avail itself to strong manipulations, to might makes right, to forcing your opinion, your views, your power upon others, things like that. So that's why it's like, it's a trine, but is it pleasant? I don't know. It could be if you use it, in a way that's kind. But yeah, then just recapping, planets changing sign. Mostly we're just dealing with standard Sun through Venus, moving into the sign of the season that we're moving into. The 2nd of July, we have Mercury entering Leo. 11th of July, Venus entering Leo. 20th of July, Mars entering Gemini. And then the 22nd of July, finally, we're entering solar Leo season. And yeah, I think that's pretty much covering everything. I feel like I've gone on for absolutely ever at this point. But thank you. And just to make sure that I didn't forget that I am a total noob, my recording got weird. So yes, thank you so much for sticking with me through all of this. Let me know any feedback that you have. Again, this is all super brand new to me. If you want me to try somehow in my life to be less wordy, then I can try and make shorter videos and just focus on certain points. I kind of get into the flow with readings and stuff like that, so I just really like to go through it all in detail. But if you do want shorter videos, maybe I could do these longer ones and then just hit highlights in another video. Yeah, just any of your preferences or anything like that, I would definitely really love to hear. But yeah, thank you again so much for being here. I would love to see you subscribe. I will cherish all likes, but just thank you for being here. And I hope you have a really beautiful month, and I will see you very soon with another video. Thanks.